Hey guys, Michael Califf, author of A Very Broken System, tuning in on the horrible issue that is the Porpunkah episode and the Dezi Freeman and the general calamity that is all things law and order in Victoria. So on the weekend, usually I do a little podcast for a longer one on YouTube. I'm going to touch on how the type of rotten culture that exists in Victoria, sadly, and the higher officers of Victoria Police, the courts, the whole law and order system, the prisons, the entire lot has a rotten culture, and that culture stems from a very well documented rotten cultured police force, which is evident in things like the Lawyer X fiasco and even the Constable Simon Illingworth story, which was basically a brave constable speaking up about outright police corruption. I mean, we're talking about the type of police corruption that led to the murder of an informant. Like horrible police corruption that was never eradicated from Victoria Police. Nobody was held to account for it, nothing. Anyway, so with that type of rotten culture still, swimming about, I'll give you an example of the type of, so you can, it's public, so you can see it. If you're in if you're in the know sort of thing, however you got there, be it you work in the system or you've been a victim of the system, as in you've made a mistake and been at the mercy of the system is a better way to word it, then you would know. But if you haven't, you wouldn't know. So we'll fall on a public. I try and avoid the glorifying the air raids and the glorifying of the crime if I can. But let's give you an example of the very public Lawyer X Tony Mokbel saga. So now, what I mean by that, I'm not just talking about what everybody saw in the Nicola Gobbo Lawyer X fiasco. I'm talking about the parts you don't see, where you see when you know how hard they went after Tony Mokbel. Now you got to put it in perspective. There's a lot of other active drug dealers in Victoria right now, so don't mistake or misread that for 1 second. So what happened with Tony Mokbel was literally, and this culture is exactly the rotten culture of the ego-driven dinosaur rotten culture that still exists today, that led to things like Porpunkah and Dezi Freeman. The harassment that everyone can see there. No, I don't agree one bit. That detective, those police officers, no way should any police officer lose their life. Don't misread that. But let me explain. It's not just like, this is what a rotten culture does. I've been saying it for years. There's a lot of, the evidence is in, the LA riots were caused in the 1989, 1990, 91, whatever riots were caused by a corrupt police force. Anyway, so it's well documented. Wall Street was caused by a corrupt police force. So anyway, on the Tony Mokbel got charged originally with 20 odd years ago, a number of years ago, he got charged with, before there were precursor laws, he got charged with amphetamine, when what he actually had was pseudoephedrine, which he ended up beating it, but basically he made a mockery of the higher ranking detectives, and that led to like this ego-driven, gotta pay him back and get him. Anyway, so he gets locked up, arrested after the Lawyer X fiasco. He's in prison. That's not enough for these ego maniacs. They went after everything. Similar, like, they wanted to eradicate this guy who dared embarrass the force, you know, like literally above and beyond stuff. And in that, aside harassing his family, his nieces, all that type of stuff, that standard stuff, what they would do very manipulatively and cunningly, they would do things like drip feed stories to the media. They know exactly how prison works. They know how, you know, if you've got a young clique of, you know, 23, 24 jail gang circling in the jail, and you keep popping front page news stories on a guy, you know, Tony Mokbel says he's running the prisons, Kingpin Tony Mokbel. Tony Mokbel, Kingpin, says he's not scared of the young guys in prison. You know, just running story after story like that. Eventually, you're going to get one of these young jail gangs that are going to do the work for them. Well, that's the type of thing that they did. And you can check this, like leading up to Tony Mokbel getting stabbed in prison, they being the mainstream media that are more than happy to get manipulated, so it seems, by the rock ape Neanderthal-like Victoria police. They ran story after story explaining how Tony Mokbel's running the prison system. Tony Mokbel, which wasn't the case at all. He was just doing his prison like any other inmate. But here they were, like, Tony Mokbel this, Tony Mokbel that. And then, not coincidentally at all, one day, the day after, a big front page Herald Sun story of Tony Mokbel runs prison, says he's the kingpin. He, you know, bang, he gets stabbed. That was all. That obviously there's plausible deniability, but make no mistake about it. That was set up by the rock ape Victoria Police, knowing exactly what they're doing. 100%. That's the type of games above and beyond they play with your money, with your resources, which is all fine, right? You'd go, yeah, so what? The guy was a drug dealer. I agree. I don't like drug dealers. No problem, right? I agree. He's a drug dealer. However, we are doing horrible. We're doing atrociously in Victoria. So this business where even one resource, 1 cent is getting used above and beyond to pay people back, literally just even the half an hour it took to get on the phone and go, hey, Herald Sun guy, you know, Tony Mokbel's like running like the prisons. He's like, yeah, oh yeah, he's doing awesome stuff in there. That guy, you want to see him? He's got more bupe than like bupe. He's got more bupe than a chemist, that guy. Oh yeah. Even that, when you're doing as poorly in the state of Victoria as we are in all things law and order, is just disgusting. It should not happen. Every single ounce of resource for police, prisons, courts, rehabs needs to go to making the place a safe, better place. Look at the place. We've just set the worst crime stats since 1992. And the reason we've done that is because of that exact same culture, that rotten, ego-driven, nobody, you know, who cares, we don't have to answer to anybody attitude that exists in Victoria. That is why. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't think for 1 second I'm having a go at the brave frontline. No chance. They're the ones who get tarred with the same brush. They're the Constable Simon Illingworths. They're the ones who end up, you know, being getting shot, thrown under the bus. The amount of times you would see in a prison system, for example, you would see a scumbag prison officer goes out of his way to be a prick to the inmates, and then one cooked inmate ends up taking it out on the decent, brave, just everyday, hardworking officer turning up to work. Why? Because he or she was set up by in this case, police officers in higher offices that should be good leaders, but they're not. Why are they not good leaders? Because they don't have to answer to anybody. She'll be right. Daniel Andrews will just sweep it under the rug for us. Don't worry about that. If things go pear-shaped and, one of our targets barrels down the Burke Street Mall, who cares? Dan will fix it. That's exactly what we're dealing with. Anyway, I just thought I'd let you know. Speak soon, guys.